Hello world and true believers. I know I just made a video and it was really long on the extreme male-minded theory of Simone Baron Cohen on ASD, but I realized there was a couple of other things I left out that I just kind of wanted to follow up on. Another is that when I was a little girl, I didn't like being touched at all. Like my mom would cuddle with my sister and brother on the couch all the time, and she would say, "Brenda, do you want to come up here with us?" And I would say, "No, I'm okay," which would hurt my mom like a lot. And part of me kind of felt bad about that, but at the same time, I had real difficulties doing that. But I would try to do other things to show her that I cared about her, because I do love my mom a lot, and I know she's a very nurturing and caring woman, and so I have this thing with her. We have this weird relationship now where I know you guys are gonna think this sounds weird, but I call her my slave, because like she'll ask me questions that are uncomfortable. I used to get mad at her, and we would get into fights and stuff like that. But now what I do instead is I call her my slave. Like when she starts to ask me questions I don't like, I was like, "Slave, you're being insolent. I need you to get into the closet now." And because slaves do not talk back. I'm gonna have to send you back, and I'm gonna have to get a new model. And then she starts giggling, and my therapist, the one I talked about, that was my Yoda. He's the one who kind of taught me this: deflecting and dismissing. I guess someone's asking you something that's uncomfortable, and I don't do it with everyone, but I do it with my mom, because I know how the things that will make her giggle, and if I can do that, then I can. And if she's asking me something that's uncomfortable, I can avoid fighting with her by doing things like that. Like I'll tell her that she's my toy and I just want to shrink her down and put her in my pocket and carry her around all day, and that just makes her giggle and happy. And so I do weird things like that with her. Because the other thing that I do, because when I was little, I think I disappointed her a lot, because I didn't understand that my behavior was hurtful to her. Like sometimes I did, but it was difficult for me to override it, to do something to make her feel better. Another thing that I did is when I was about 5, and I was going to kindergarten. My mom walked me to the bus stop, and I turned around and looked at her and I said, "I don't need you anymore." And then I turned right back around, and I didn't. And my mom said she cried the whole way home. And like it wasn't until I was older that I realized that was very unkind of me and inconsiderate. And because I was like that a lot. I was a loner when I was little, and I it's not that I didn't want to see things from other people's perspective. I just didn't even understand that they had a perspective that was different than mine. Like I didn't think of things in terms of that way of perspective. It was just, in fact, I would get so frustrated when people couldn't see things from my perspective, because in my mind, the way I saw something was so logical, it just made sense, and I didn't understand why anybody would argue with me about it or anything. And it was frustrating, and then it became a puzzle, and that's why I told you guys I started writing my parents letters to help me to communicate with them better. So in a lot of ways, even though I had a hard time sometimes getting along with my mom or even my dad sometimes, I think it was good, because it helped me to better navigate the world, because I realized I struggled with communicating with them sometimes. And it was around when I was about 8 when I started writing them letters to try to so I wouldn't argue with them, so we wouldn't get into these crazy fights where I would like break down or run away. That happened a lot of times where I would melt down, and I would run away into the woods, and I would stay in there, and a lot of times they would call the police because I wouldn't come back for a really long time. And I wasn't doing it because I wanted attention, which I think a lot of times the neurosocial brain will think, because they'll think, oh, they're just acting up because they want attention. It was actually just the opposite. I wanted to be left alone. I hated it when I couldn't think past my emotions. I hated it when my emotions got so out of control, and that's why I want to make a video on emotional regulation, that I couldn't see things logically. And the only way for me to calm myself down well enough is to be alone. I needed to get alone and calm down and kind of recalibrate myself, re-equilibrate like my brain or whatever. And the only way to do that was to remove myself from the situation. And so that's what I was doing. And I think that was very difficult for my parents to understand. It definitely was difficult for my sister to understand, because she would get very, very upset that when I ran away, that my parents would call the police on me, and then she would sometimes pretend that she would run away, and they didn't do that with her because they knew that she was just trying to get attention, and they would tell her that I was crazy. So there was that. And there's also like, then as I got older and I started dating and stuff like that, the other thing that happened to me, like I said, I didn't like to be touched unless it was prelude to sex. And I'm going to say this, I didn't like to be touched. So I would started dating these guys, but then I realized as a girl, it's really difficult if a guy wants to be affectionate to get away from that. And I remember I had a boyfriend in my early 20s, and he liked to snuggle. And it was the first time I would go to his apartment, and he'd want me to sleep over. And what I would wait to him to do is I would wait for him to fall asleep. And as soon as he fell asleep, I would go on the ground. I would make a bed on the ground with my teddy bear. His name was Puka at the time. And I would go to sleep on the ground. The thing is, he would wake up in the middle of the night, realize I wasn't there, and he would get on the ground with me. I would wake up because he would be snuggling with me, and I would feel uncomfortable. I would get up and I would get into the bed, and then this would happen all the time. And because to me, a lot of times, like, I didn't understand why girls saw sex and love as synonymous. Because in my mind, they weren't. They were very different things. In fact, in my mind, love was something that would actually destroy sex, because like it seems to me that the people that you love the most you don't want to have sex with. Sex to me seems like it's passion, it's a hunger, and that definitely seems like it's a more meal-based mindset. So I just wanted to make that as like a follow-up, and you know, because I think that is kind of significant, is the whole affection thing. I've always had problems with giving and receiving appropriate affection or various other types of things. I just don't think, like, and I think it goes to that thing, like I read in that book I was telling you guys about, Social by Matthew Lieberman, and he talks about how, especially kids around their prepubescent years and some of their formative years is when they begin to what is called mentalize. And that's how, when they begin to put themselves in scenarios where they begin to think about how other people perceive them and how they perceive themselves. And usually the way they perceive themselves is how they think other people perceive them. So, and I never did this. And I can, in a lot of you other spectrumites that are out there, you can talk about this. Like when I'm going to get this when I start that study, which is going to be on the 31st of this month, the next time I go. They're going to look at my default mode of thinking. And I read a bunch of studies on this when they've done fMRIs of people on the spectrum, and the default mode of thinking is not mentalizing. And from what I can tell you guys right now, and from what you can see from what I've told you about, my default mode of thinking tends to be, I think about books, I think about problem solving things, I think about, I don't think about things with other people. I mean, if I think about other people, I only think of them in terms of a puzzle. Like if something they've done is confusing to me, I will try to figure it out. But it's because I'm trying to get the pieces and put them together. But I don't think of myself like I don't imagine potential things in the future. Like I'll hear other people talk about that, like how they'll think about like an event's coming up and they'll imagine how it will be, or when they think about the past, it's almost like they're fantasizing about the past. When I think about memories from the past, I think of it almost like it's like I'm replaying a movie in my head and I'm looking at it to learn something from it. I rotate it in my head, looking at it from different degrees and trying to figure something out that's going on in it, but I don't think about it in any other way. And I don't think that is how it is for people that aren't on the spectrum. I think the whole mentalizing thing is something that I think we can do it if we try, but it's kind of like, I think it's, once again, it's the opposite of the two mindsets. I think the default mode of thinking for most people who aren't on the spectrum, neurosocial brain, is to mentalize. And that, you know, problem solving and stuff like that is the other mode, but that is something that they don't do. That's not the default mode of thinking. I think it's the other way around for us. I think our default mode of thinking is we think about ideas, problems, puzzles, things like that, books that we've read, movies that we watched, research that we've conducted, things of that nature. That's our default. But we can, if we try hard enough, we can mentalize. It's just much more difficult. It's this mentalizing to us is like problem solving for the rest of the world. That's not their default mode of thinking. That's what they do when they have to take a test or when they're studying or something like that. It's not what they do naturally. So, and I think so. It's just an opposite. It's just like I said. It's not that we don't do we don't do things that other people do. We just come at it from a different angle. It's like the big picture thinking, or you know, like how, like lateral thinking and all different kinds of things like I've talked about before. So I just wanted to follow up on that and see what you guys think, and so you can let me know. Okay, bye.